Welcome back to Hannity. All right, unfortunately, that's all the time we have left. As always, thank you for being with us. Please set your DVR so you never miss an episode of Hannity. I want to remind you, you do not want to miss our show tomorrow night. Our sources are telling us tomorrow's going to be a big breaking news day. Let not your heart be troubled. The news continues. Laura's next, and we'll see you back here for an important breaking news Friday night.
Welcome to the Ingraham Angle, live from Washington tonight. How the Mueller investigation reveals that unlimited power does corrupt. That is the subject of tonight's Angle. What we've seen over the past 7 months at the Mueller investigation reveals a lot about how big government can end up becoming a threat to representative democracy. And the more we look at the web of Clinton and Obama loyalists who burrowed into Mueller's office, the more obvious it all becomes. There were a number of highly influential and powerful people working inside the Obama administration who were not only horrified about the idea of Donald Trump winning the presidency, they were intent on preventing him from being elected by any means necessary. And if that meant applying for a FISA warrant based on a phony dossier in order to spy on the campaign, maybe they'd do it. And if it meant deploying the entire mainstream media apparatus into DEFCON 1 mode, hyperventilating about Russia collusion 24/7, they'd do it. And today, if it requires floating a specious story alleging that the president has early onset dementia, well, they'll do that too. Or maybe spreading damaging falsehoods from anonymous sources that are later parroted and then retracted by major news organizations. Yeah, they'll do that too. And if it means propagating the idea that Don Trump Jr., Jared, and the president were in some conspiracy with the old KGB to throw the election, no problem. Whatever it takes. As a former Mueller investigator, Peter Strzok, put it, they needed an insurance policy to stop Trump. Going on to reference a meeting in Andy's office, and why is that significant? Well, here's the chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, Bob Goodlatte.
Andy is presumably Andrew McCabe, the deputy director of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. This text is very troubling because it suggests that they're doing something. They have a plan to take action to make sure that Donald Trump does not get elected president of the United States in the highest levels of the Federal Bureau of Investigation.
Now, this entire investigation, these texts, all of it, this has become a complete farce. They have an unlimited budget. They have an unlimited staff. They have basically an unlimited term. Mueller's team can stay on the hunt forever how long they want. It's insane. The founders never envisioned that a separate office inside the executive branch could hire a bunch of agenda-driven investigators in search of a crime by the head of the executive branch. I mean, if Congress wants to get rid of the president, they have a way to do that. It's called impeachment. That's their constitutional prerogative. But this deal with Mueller is now just totally out of hand. And at a minimum, a few things need to happen immediately in order to at least stabilize the situation. First, Deputy FBI Director Andrew McCabe must be fired, period. He allowed Strzok to be the lead investigator of the Russian investigation after he had been a key player in the ultimate exoneration of the Hillary Clinton email investigation. And remember, he helped Comey soften the language of his non-indictment indictment of Mrs. Clinton. And there's a lot of other things about Strzok we won't go into now, but you all know them by now. And whether McCabe actually conspired with Strzok and went to the FISA court to surveil the Trump campaign, that's really important too, and that also has to be investigated. But a separate grounds for firing McCabe for cause may be the meeting Strzok references in his text messages, the thing that we just referenced. Because if true, McCabe actually took part in a discussion or actual planning, who knows, to subvert Trump's campaign, or maybe if he was elected, his ability to lead the government as president of the United States. That text message could be the smoking gun. And as for Bob Mueller himself, indeed, he has, throughout his career, served his country with honor and distinction. But that doesn't change the fact that right now, this investigation he's heading has become irreparably tainted. As the Wall Street Journal just put it, the man who should be most disturbed public. Evidence is building instead that some officials at the FBI who've worked for him may have interfered in an American presidential election. Congress needs to insist that its rights as a co-equal branch of government exist to discover the truth. Now, I'm not calling for Mueller to be fired. It's tempting, but I'm not. But at the very least, he needs to put the brakes on this investigation, at least pause it for a bit. I agree with what Alan Dershowitz said on my radio show this morning. It's time for a respected, independent expert to come in and thoroughly examine the individuals conducting this probe and fire anyone inside who evinces even a hint of an appearance of a conflict of interest. That's all it should take. That's how high the stakes are. Otherwise, the public confidence in the Mueller operation will and should collapse under its own weight. These endless revelations of bias. And that's the angle. Joining us now for reaction in New York is John Bolton, former U.S. ambassador to the UN, Fox News contributor, and a recovering lawyer. And here in Washington, Richard Goodstein, a Democratic strategist. Richard?
And also a recovering lawyer.
Oh, no, we're all recovering lawyers. Isn't that sad? So, Richard, let's go to you first. Where am I wrong here?
This is Alice in Wonderland. Sorry, Laura. You know, I have a lot of respect for you. The FBI is what won Donald Trump this election, right? We know Rudy Giuliani had all his friends that put pressure on Comey to put out that letter 11 days before the election, which he had no business doing, and he didn't disclose to the public the way in which the Russians were trying to kind of tilt this election, in addition to his press conference on July 5th, which, again, went against the FBI rules. So that, to me, is kind of the fundamental way in which I think you're misrepresenting.
So the July 5th press conference by Comey, you think that helped Trump in the end because it was a non-indictment indictment?
So the FBI director should have either said, we've got the following charges, or done nothing. That's their practice. That's what their policy calls for.
I agree with you.
And he totally violated
I actually agree with you. I don't think he should have done that either. But the fundamental question about this probe is, just given the fact that it's so high stakes, just to have this guy, Peter Strzok, Weissman, Jeannie Rhee, when they're not just, they didn't just vote for Obama. That's fine. You're a Democrat. No big deal. But when you're someone who worked for the Clinton Foundation, when you represented Ben Rhodes, as Jeannie Rhee did, when you're high-fiving Sally Yates via text message about how she's defying the president, you're not just a Democrat, you're an adversary of the president. Yeah. That's why having them in the investigation, I think, is problematic. John, let's go to you. Ambassador Bolton, your thoughts on this as a former attorney and watching this from the outside. Bob Mueller has a stellar reputation. Republicans built it up, and so did Democrats.
Well, I think that it doesn't really matter what Bob Mueller's reputation is before he becomes an independent counsel, because I think the entire concept of independent counsel is so fundamentally flawed that you inherently have the risk of the investigation turning into exactly what this has turned into. I think Deputy Attorney General Rosenstein, however, is the one who's not doing his job. His testimony yesterday, I think, was extremely disturbing because he demonstrated, to my mind, utter obliviousness to this maelstrom that's surrounding the Mueller investigation. Seemingly unable to look at these examples of bias by Peter Strzok and many, many others and connect them to what's happening in the investigation. So when you combine that with the fundamentally unconstitutional nature of an unrestrained independent counsel, I think we are seeing the destruction of the reputation of the Justice Department and the FBI. I'm an alumnus of the Justice Department. I've worked with FBI investigators in a number of capacities over the years. I am just thunderstruck at what I've seen in the past 6 months coming out.
John, you know Attorney General Mukasey is the one who said only in banana republics does the winner go after the loser. So look.
No, this time the loser's going after the winner. That's even more remarkable.
No. There's this talk still about independent counsels going after her. Again, it's 13 months since the election.
I'm against an independent counsel to investigate her or anybody else.
Right. But you will agree, will you not, that Strzok, who's not a lawyer, he didn't actually put his name on the document. James Comey, who is a lawyer, went to a very distinguished law school, Laura, did. He was the one who's responsible for everything that went forward. So I think this is kind of a big misdirection as the noose is tightening, with all due respect, around the president and people close to him. We're seeing one misdirection after another. I think we'll see more of them until either Mueller gets fired or he says what he's going to come up with.
Here's a fundamental fact. More than one person can commit wrongdoing. I think James Comey so badly bungled the Clinton email investigation that Donald Trump should have fired him on January the 20th. He would have been fully justified, and nobody would have said obstruction of justice. It's a tragedy that he didn't fire him. But in the course of the email investigation, as we now see from the emails that have come out, we've got people who were so biased against Trump that it seems to me almost inescapable that their bias affected their judgment. And this is where Rosenstein's testimony yesterday was so bad, because it's as if he was saying, I'm not going to connect bias to outcome, which is clear. I'm going to insist that they say in meetings at the FBI, we should not indict Hillary Clinton because otherwise Donald Trump would be elected president. That never happened. I think what Strzok and others did was move Comey, if he wasn't already inclined to do it, toward the conclusion there was no requirement for cyander. And that's fundamentally wrong.
Right. And hold on right there, guys, because we also tonight learned more about former FBI Director Comey's decision to characterize Hillary Clinton's emails as just extremely careless rather than the statutory language, which would have been grossly negligent. Just tonight, Fox News obtained a copy of Comey's actual draft letter that exonerated Clinton. Richard and I were just talking about it, and it shows the phrase grossly negligent was deleted in more than one spot. So perhaps, more alarming than is that the draft shows Comey originally was going to state it was reasonably likely, though, that hostile actors had actually infiltrated Hillary's server, but that was also taken out. So, look, Senate investigators tell Fox News now that they suspect Strzok is the one who really made all of these edits, both to the grossly negligent language and about the infiltration of her email server. Now, Richard, I want you to address this infiltration of the email server, because this gets serious, because this is classified information that could have been taken by a foreign actor. And this was hinted at a couple of years ago when we were talking about this. And it was said at the time it was likely that a foreign entity did manage to penetrate her system because it didn't have the security of, as one of the guys who testified said, even like a Gmail program.
Let me indulge me. Your viewers need to understand what the statute says. Whoever having lawful possession of information relating to national defense through gross negligence, or let's say simple-mindedness, permits the information to be delivered to anyone in violation of his trust should be fined or imprisoned. Okay? Do we think that Hillary Clinton delivered the information on her server? Oh, no. Or let me contrast Donald Trump being in the Oval Office with the Russians, giving them, that's where the simple-mindedness comes in, giving them information that we got from, from Al-Qaeda through Israeli sources about using computers to blow up airplanes. And therefore tipping off Iran. That is textbook. So within that same statute.
Well, he's the president of the United States, so I guess when something's classified in that case, he would probably make the argument. That was he unclassifying it? I mean, Ambassador Bolton. I'm not sure how that is apt in this example when we're talking about thousands and thousands of emails that were deleted and a computer system that was maintained completely contrary to the guidelines of how State Department documents and other materials should have been stored. But nevertheless, Richard makes a point. The accusations about President Trump and the Russians behind closed doors in that one meeting.
Kicked out the U.S. press, kept in the Russian press. John, come on.
Then move to impeach him on that ground. Right. That's up to you. But let's come back to Hillary. If I had proposed in any of my tenure at the State Department doing what she did, I'd have been fired. That's the example of different standards applying. Let's come to the statute in question, because you only talked about a piece of it. It's a very comprehensively drafted statute that starts at the top when you have clear espionage where somebody intends to give information to foreigners, and it comes down the line to get to gross negligence. Now, why is gross negligence there?
Yeah.
Because being that careless can have exactly the same effect of transmitting sensitive information to an opponent. That's
You're
what
glossing
they were
over the
after.
word deliver,
Let
John.
me finish.
She didn't
Let
deliver.
me
I understand.
finish.
Okay.
Well, we got to wrap this. But
Comey's
Ambassador,
speech is where he said we're not going to follow that standard. That's where he was fundamentally wrong.
Right, that's where he's wrong. But why edit it? If it was also, I mean, they're editing that document for a reason, because they wanted to reach a particular conclusion during a presidential election year. They did not want to put a statement out there that, by any lawyer's understanding, and certainly it was mine at the time, would indicate that Mrs. Clinton violated the statute.
Yeah,
like
it was
any
a fit
military
of candor.
guy.
It was a fit of candor that they corrected.
Well,
except she didn't deliver anything to anybody.
No,
if a thief goes into your home, you're not delivering the goods that the thief stole.
No, Richard. If a military officer leaves a computer on a table that has classified information that he took home without intending to give it to him, he can be prosecuted under that statute. He's not delivering it to the thief, but it gets taken. He permits it to be taken. That's the statute. That's how it's read. But this is fascinating. This is going to be going on for some time. Both of you, great sparring partners, Richard and Ambassador Bolton. Fantastic. And by the way, what's really behind Marco Rubio's opposition to the Republican tax reform? Wow. Stay with us. After he appeared on our show a few weeks ago, Marco Rubio is now withholding his support for the GOP tax bill until he gets an increase to the child tax credit. But some are just, come on, maybe it's a joke. Some are saying it might be an old campaign grudge. No, causing him to sink a huge legislative achievement for the president? Come on.
Here's a guy that buys a house for $179,000. He sells it to a lobbyist who's probably here for $380,000, and then legislation is passed. You tell me about this guy. This is what we're going to have.
Here's the guy that inherited $200 million. If he hadn't inherited $200 million, you know where Donald Trump would be right now? Selling watches in Manhattan.
I watched him repeat himself 5 times 4 weeks ago. And
I saw you repeat yourself 5 times 5 seconds ago.
I watched him. Meltdown on the stage like I've never seen anybody.
It says 5 things. Everyone's dumb. He's going to make America great again. We're going to win, win, win. He's winning in the polls. And the lines around the state.
Yeah, worked pretty well, didn't it? Melton is bad blood now. And we didn't even get into the small hands debate, but God, weren't those the good old days? Former White House Press Secretary Sean Spicer, help me out, my friend. First of all, great to have you on the show.
Thank you. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Been a while.
It's good to see you. What's going on here with Rubio? I mean,
well, look, we haven't had comprehensive tax reform in 31 years. I think this is when you have a 52-seat majority, everyone's looking for their opportunity to get their issue highlighted, their issue addressed. At the end of the day, Marco Rubio is going to be a vote for us. He is not going to let this moment escape us, and he understands how important tax reform is. But I think he, like a lot of other senators, are making sure that they get their voice heard before this is done.
Mike Lee is partnering with him, I guess, on this.
There's a couple others.
Corker is.
I think Corker's probably one that I would say is gone.
This is what I like about what President Trump does. He forces everybody to put their cards on the table.
Yeah,
I mean, you know where everybody is now. Corker, like I always knew that Corker basically just couldn't stand Trump, didn't want to work with him, and was going to subvert a lot of his agenda. And indeed, right down to the end, Corker's doing that.
You know what's interesting though, but the big takeaway that I look at in a day like today, when everyone's horse trading, is how important that Alabama seat was.
Yep.
How important our majority is, because what this comes down to is we had in 2018, if Chuck Schumer's the leader, we're not going to be having a debate about what tax credits or how much more tax relief people are getting. This is why making sure that the president maintains a majority in the House and Senate is crucial to keeping the president's agenda moving forward.
And you think of John McCain, who's in the hospital suffering from the glioblastoma treatment and what it does to your body, and Thad Cochran is ailing. He's the senator from Mississippi. Remember, the Republicans rushed in there to stave off that Chris McDaniel, that primary challenger a few years ago. And I think a lot of the populists, including Bannon and others, thought, wait a second, Cochran's 76 years old. It's time to get a younger person in there. And you could kind of play that game of, Moore was a mistake, but, maybe Cochran was a mistake because you could have a younger, more vibrant senator in there as well. It plays both ways.
Well, right now we got to concentrate on getting 50 votes for this tax tax bill so that the American people can enjoy the fruits of it.
What about Paul Ryan? He says next year is his last year. Is that because he sees a Republican wipeout?
I want to stop you right there for a second, because I think when you say this story was a Politico story, the president called Paul Ryan and said, hey, I need you to stay and be a partner of mine and help drive the agenda forward. And Paul comes out and says, I want to stay. I've committed to getting this agenda done. Paul Ryan at heart's a policy guy who finally sees a Republican Senate, and a Republican president, and knows that he can achieve some of those policy goals that he's worked tirelessly for so long. So I think one of the traps that we as conservatives have to stop getting into is every time Politico or the New York Times throws out some clickbait, that we immediately run around, assume it's true, and start planning around it. Paul came out today after the president called him and said he's committed to staying. He wants to get this agenda.
Do you think there's no truth to the rumor?
I think, look, everybody in public office or everyone who's been around this for a long time, thinks about when they're going to get out or what the circumstances are.
I thought about it like, a couple weeks ago. And I apologize every night. I'm like, no, I'm just teasing.
You got a great show.
But I think it's a grind. Politics is a grind. And he's a guy who's done it since he was 25 years old.
And it takes a toll on your family, the commute stuff. He's got a lot to be proud of. But I think he really sees the next few years as an opportunity to get all of these lifelong policy goals achieved.
But if the Republicans get wiped out next year, Paul Ryan's not going to want to sit here.
If they get wiped out, then he's minority leader. Yeah. But I think he recognizes that the president's agenda is what's going to keep the Republicans in power, and he wants to be there to fulfill that.
Are they close now? I mean, closer?
Look, I think everybody understands that the president has an agenda that the Republican base is highly supportive of, and they want to work with him. And I think the president gets that. He's grown into this job as someone who's an outsider and a disruptor. He's starting to learn that some of these folks that have spent a lot more time.
You can't fight everybody at once.
Right. But he's getting along and he's getting things done, and this will be a big win for this president and this country.
I know you know Omarosa. I know her a little bit from the White House days, and it was a big deal today. She was on Good Morning America, and she had this to say. Let's watch.
As the only African-American woman in this White House, as a senior staff and assistant to the president, I have seen things that have made me uncomfortable, that have upset me, that have affected me deeply and emotionally, that has affected my community and my people. And when I can tell my story, it is a profound story that I know the world will want to hear.
She is going to be leaving the White House on January 20th, and it was a big focus of the White House briefing today. It's like they never talk about Omarosa, but today, well, why is she being paid through January 20th? What is it, like $1,500? I mean, like, what do you? But anyway, what's going on there? Do you know any insights?
I don't, but I think.
Why was she hired? Do you think?
I don't know. But I think it's important that.
Does she have any qualifications to work in the White House?
I think
I like her. I mean, she seems nice to me.
I think that, look, she was very loyal to the president.
She campaigned for him.
And I think the president brought a lot of people who wanted to fulfill his agenda, and that's his prerogative as president-elect at the time. I wish her the best, but I'm not really sure what.
But she has a story to tell. Did you see any part of her story?
I don't.
Give me something here. You saw something.
Well, look, She's
a very charismatic person, very colorful, charismatic individual. She's big personality. I kind of like that, but some people can't take that.
I will let you leave it at that.
Do you miss it? Do you miss the rush? I mean, it was exhausting.
It was exhausting.
I've talked to you throughout a lot of that time, and it is a 19, 20-hour day.
Yeah, 7 days a week.
And you never sleep, and you never get any privacy.
Right.
You have a little bit of privacy back?
A little. It's growing. I mean this, though. It was truly an honor to do this, and I was proud to be part of helping the president move his agenda forward. I love being on the outside. I love being able to be supportive from this thing. It's definitely a lot less stressful. So I look forward to doing a lot of other opportunities. You've got a book coming out.
I know. I'm excited about your book.
Good.
Do you think that this year, when we look back at it objectively, this year will be seen as a successful year for this president, given where the economy is, given where consumer confidence is, deregulatory efforts?
I think I do. And I think especially if we can get this tax reform done. But a lot of the things that he's done in terms of regulatory measures to peel back, to get business booming again, to get people hired. All of those economic indicators, housing starts, consumer confidence, et cetera, are going through the roof. And I think when people look back objectively, whether it's 2 years, 5 years, 10 years, they're going to say this was a real economic powerhouse of a year, and it was the president's policies and initiatives that really got the economy booming again. We came in and people mocked us for talking about 3% growth, and now we're on the path to that's become now the baseline.
He needs to get the credit for that, and he's not getting the credit.
Right.
I think he will, but we need happy voters going into 2018. Sean, great to see you, my friend. Merry Christmas, and I can't wait to read your book.
Thank you.
Got to come on radio and TV. And coming up, is there a backlash swelling against the Me Too movement? And RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel met with the president today. You want to know
Today's
what they
upset
discussed?
election
in Alabama, Tuesday's upset election in Alabama, has given Democrats a rosy vision of a return to glory, and I understand that. And that's led a passel of pundits predicting doom, utter doom, for the GOP in 2018.
You're watching this 170-year-old institution swiftly marching itself toward destruction.
Because can a divided, really more than a divided, but an internally competitive, an internally angry, combative Republican Party, can it win in 2018 and 2020?
Right now, in the Republican Party, there are people who are trying to recruit similar types of candidates in Senate races around the country. This is a recipe for disaster.
Well, here's the larger issue for the GOP. And we think about this really carefully. Mitch McConnell is really smart and wily in so many ways, so experienced. But is he looking to kind of, in some ways, exploit the embarrassment in Alabama to maybe knock out viable populist candidates elsewhere? They're no Roy Moores, but they're populist, so they kind of conflate the two. I'm thinking of people like Kelly Ward in Arizona, Danny Tarkanian in New Mexico, in Nevada. So we got to think about this. This is where the populists need to be careful and smart, because it's not enough to have just a few national figures support you. No. You need money, and you need some allies within the mainstream GOP to survive, just like President Trump did. You know, Kelly Ward, remember, tried and failed to beat McCain, but I'm telling you, she's a much better candidate now than she was then. So trying to tag her as far right, as the New York Times attempted to do today, is absurd. She'd be a fine general election candidate. And the party needs more strong, smart women. Joining me now to discuss this exclusively is RNC Chairwoman Ronna McDaniel. She huddled up with President Trump today, and this is her first interview since the election in Alabama. Ronna, great to see you. How are you?
Oh, great to be here. Thanks for having me.
Merry Christmas. What's going on here? The Alabama race was a real, body blow for the Republicans, no doubt about it. But for the Republicans to extrapolate that and say, okay, any populist candidate in a place like Arizona, specifically Kelly Ward for Jeff Flake's seat, well, no, you can't do that because it's just going to be another Roy Moore. Is that fair?
Yeah, that's not fair. Alabama's unique. Special elections in and of themselves are unique. You can't extrapolate anything from them that's going to be a bellwether in 2018. You only have one candidate on the ballot, so many different circumstances that go into each special election. I do think there are some lessons. Candidates do matter. You do need good candidates. We need to let the voters make that decision. The voters don't love Washington coming in and saying this is who your candidate should be. They don't love that. Yeah. We know that. We learned that with President Trump. Voters want to decide their own fate and who their nominee is going to be. And then we are going to have to work together as a party. We need to be swimming in the same direction if we're going to win these elections.
Newt Gingrich wrote a piece in Fox News today, foxnews.com, and it was like kind of a stark warning for the Republicans. He said Republicans must pass tax cuts this year, continue the economic growth, and they need to spend January, he said, developing a new strategy capable of changing current patterns and maximizing their chances to keep the House. They have to increase their Senate majority by 5 or 6, he says, and so they'll be strong enough to really hold that majority in 2020 when those numbers are going to look more difficult. Do you agree with that analysis?
Yeah, I think Newt's right on, and the RNC's right on track to do all those things. We've raised record money. We just announced a new record in November. We're already investing in battleground states. We're already in 18 states. Our data, nobody can compete with our data, our ground game. We have more people on the ground than ever before. And we're also doing outreach to communities that we haven't been in before. We have to start showing up and having a conversation and talking about the things we have in common. But I think Newt's absolutely right. We're going to compete for those House seats. We got to keep the majority. And there's a lot of competitive Senate seats. The map looks good for us.
What did the president say, if you can share some of his thoughts today that are not private? I mean, what was his mood like? What was he?
You know, he's great. We talk about 2018.
Yep.
Today, we had the Christmas party at the White House. We had a lot of RNC members at the White House, but he's jovial. He's ready for 2018. He's always looking to help people's lives be better, and he's focused on tax cuts. We need to pass tax cuts. We just put up a website, paycheckpresident.com. He's for increasing wages, getting more jobs, and sending more money home in people's paychecks.
Well, that RNC official that quit for the Roy Moore support, was that RNC official, looking back on it, right? Well, you guys shouldn't have supported Roy Moore in the end?
Yeah, we had one out of 168. Yep. Overwhelmingly, the RNC members understand our role at the RNC is to be the political arm of the White House, and the Alabama members wanted to keep that seat, and they understand the slim majorities we had in the Senate. We always said, let Alabama decide. We knew these allegations were deeply concerning. They were incredibly troubling. But at the end of the day, Alabamans made their
Well, the president said, look, I know people, a lot of Republicans are glad he's not here, but just for my agenda, I wish we had that seat. That's a pragmatic way of looking at it, and I know it horrifies a lot of Republicans, but that is true. Losing that seat is a blow to the Republican Party.
Yeah, he always said these allegations are incredibly troubling and concerning and disqualifying if they're proven true.
Well, he's even conceded the election yet, Roy?
And kept up to date on that.
When people, I asked this on my radio show. I'm going to ask tonight.
I know.
So when they write in on their cards, yes, I'll give you $25 or $50, or they write a note, what's the number one thing people want done? The Republican electorate, what do they want done?
Well, right now I'm getting a lot of Merry Christmas cards, which is great. But I always look at them for you. It is tax cuts. We have to show that we can pass a big agenda item and govern with the majority. And they want to see people support the president. They want to see Congress support the president.
Isn't the latter really important? Support the president's agenda?
Support the president's agenda 100%. We hear that all the time at the RNC, and it is part of why we are having such record fundraising.
How do we become the Republican Party? How can it be a national party if every presidential election we write off California and New York, essentially? And how do you change that dynamic?
We're going to be in California and New York this year because of some of the congressional seats that are in play. But you do have to make small strides. And I did that as Michigan chair. We had an office in Detroit. It was open for 3 years. We never shut it down. We have to start showing up in these blue states. I was the chair of a state that nobody thought was winnable presidentially.
See?
We won it for the first time since 1988. We can replicate that across the country, but we have to put resources in. We've got to take our message in, and we've got to show up and stay.
And showing up, going into hostile political areas. When Trump went to Detroit, that black church, he's got to do that like once every couple weeks.
And he went to Flint too. He went to Detroit and Flint.
Well, would you advise him to continue to do that?
Absolutely.
Continue that push into minority areas that can be helped by real economic reform.
I want him to. He's talking about skilled trades. He's talking about jobs. He's talking about paychecks. And we need to show up and give our message because Republicans have been absent for too long. And that's certainly a focus of the Republican Party.
And did he make you drop your last name? Is he telling you not to use your maiden name? I read that. Drop your maiden name?
Story. Let me just tell you, there are 3 reasons why I have emphasized the McDaniel a little bit more.
What?
My husband, Patrick, my 2 kids, Abigail and Nash, when I took this job, they see their mom a lot less.
Yeah.
And their last name is McDaniel. They deserve for their mom to be emphasizing that name more. This is the dumbest story. We have way more important things to talk about.
Well, I mean, it's just kind of funny.
Can a man's career now be trashed with just an accusation of sexual misconduct? But I'm using the McDaniel a little bit more because I've got 3 people at home that are supporting me, and they deserve their last name.
Merry Christmas have fallen from grace.
Merry Christmas.
We can say Ryan Lizza was fired from the New Yorker, and Tavis Smiley was suspended by PBS. But in both cases, the specifics of the accusations of sexual improprieties were not made public. No names, no stories, no nothing. And both men say the relationships in question were consensual. Smiley went on a forceful counterattack in a video posted on Facebook.
PBS overreacted, and they launched a sloppy investigation. It is clear that this has gone too far, and I, for one, intend to fight back.
So have we reached a dangerous tipping point in the Me Too movement? And is this the start of a serious pushback from men and maybe women too? Let's turn to Raymond Arroyo, managing editor of EWTN News, along with Wendy Asofo, who's a Democratic strategist. Wendy, let's start with you. I can't stand men who do this in the workplace. Absolutely. I think it's foul and gross. I also don't like accusations made years later with no ability for an individual, man or woman, to defend themselves. Yeah. That's really I mean, I know Tavis Smile a little bit. I've known him for a casual friend for 20 years. I think he's telling the truth. My gut, I watched Tavis. I'm like, he's really ticked off. He's really mad. And now a consensual relationship in the workplace is apparently tantamount to sexual harassment. What's your take?
Yeah, it's really interesting. I think one thing that stuck out to me when Tavis was talking is that he kept on talking about this consensual relationship. And that's great if he had one. But the allegations from PBS, they talked about multiple relationships. And that's what's interesting.
About multiple consensual relationships. You can't have those? I thought it's a free love generation now. We can do whatever we want.
Absolutely, you can do what you want. But they said it's not just one person that was consensual. There's actually other people there.
So, how's that harassment?
But what's really interesting here is this whole notion of due process. Due process is a legal term. When we're talking about the employment, that does not go into the realm of the employment agency.
Wendy, in the name of justice, though, you can't just be charging men and having secret investigations with people who may have had consensual relationships with him. Maybe he's telling the truth. Here's my problem. We are seeing a rash of this. This feels like a revival of The Crucible. I hope Arthur Miller is getting residuals for this. Look, I have a guy I worked with years ago in Summerstock, Robert Knepper. He's a great character actor. He's on a show called iZombie on CW. They suspended him for months on the set. That's how it should work. But he was almost driven away entirely. I mean, his name was... The reports went out there in Variety and the Hollywood Reporter. His name was tarnished as a result of this. And I worry when you have dead people now being charged.
Wait, who's dead getting charged right
Samantha Fox charged David Cassidy, who's been dead for 2 weeks, with sexual groping in the 1980s. We have
1980s?
We have to take a breath and figure out what is legitimate here. But I worry that there's a fever in the air, and that men, particularly those in the public eye, are susceptible to this kind of attack.
And that is the court of public opinion. And I do think that that's the downside. The downside is even if you are proven innocent, the court of public opinion has already judged you, and it's hard for you to get your
Wendy,
name back.
I think it's going to start happening to women, too. Women in positions of authority, bosses. And I think women are going to get burned by this, because I think there are a lot of people who are not going to hire women, not because they don't like working with women, but because they're afraid. I think men and women perhaps are going to be afraid to operate in the workplace because of these kinds of charges. Years later, if you have a meeting behind closed doors,
you don't know.
What can you do? 10 years later, oh no, you said I didn't say this. I don't remember.
30 years ago in an elevator, you bumped me, and I felt awkward about that.
It's not about that. It's about making sure that we conduct ourselves in a professional manner. And I think if there's smoke somewhere, there may be fire. And we have to investigate that.
See, I don't mind puritanical moral indignation.
Let's take it across the board.
Just make sure you act like a Puritan and comport yourself.
Yeah, what was it? Marcy Kaptur, the congresswoman this week, said that, what did she say? That
she said that there was a member who had a cleavage that went down to the floor, and that was an invitation. And other Democratic women were not happy.
Yeah, that was completely wrong.
So how you conduct yourself, how you carry yourself, how you dress doesn't
say anything. You know what? It does not say anything.
It dresses up to your pubic bone. That doesn't say anything.
Oh, Laura, I think
I've seen that coming out of some of the schools in D.C.
No,
I'm sorry.
I do not think the way you dress should invite any form of sexual assault. I think that is not good. That is not what we're talking about.
All right, but I'm just saying there are some mini skirts. We are pushing it.
It's not an invitation, but it does send a man a certain impression of how a woman views herself, and ditto what a man's wearing.
I completely disagree.
If I come in a wife beater shirt and jockey shorts, that tells you.
I don't want to.
No, you would think there's something wrong with this man.
No, I would think.
Oh no, come on. No, so Paul Ryan says we should have more kids because we have to support Social Security. Apparently, he said, look, we have to do our part. What's the fertility rate in the United States? How many kids are we having? 1%.
Beneath 1%.
Beneath 1%. So that means we don't replace our population.
Barely, just barely. I mean, look. Here's the bottom line. Social Security is constructed, you know this, Wendy.
Yes.
It's constructed so that the new generation sustains the old.
Absolutely.
If you're only having one kid and you have two parents, you have a problem. And that's what Paul Ryan is essentially saying. We need more kids.
Well, let me go ahead and take a dig at the Republican Party while I can, because at the end of the day, a lot of millennials are not having kids because of our social structure as it stands right now. Today is the anniversary of Sandy Hook, right? There's people who are dying. People don't want to have kids in this environment.
Or because they feel they're already paying somebody's retirement. Why they can't afford a kid.
Guys, by the way, the Christmas Grinch arrives in Nazareth. We'll explain. Wow, what's that about?
Your insurance.
Politics is threatening Christmas in the hometown of Jesus. Nazareth, the town where Jesus was raised, according to the Bible, is canceling much of its Christmas celebrations this year. The reason? The mayor claims it's all because of President Trump. Nazareth is a mostly Muslim town in modern Israel, but it still holds annual Christmas celebrations. And this year it's different. Mayor Ali Salam says all the joy has been taken out of the holiday because of President Trump's recent decision to recognize Jerusalem as the capital of Israel. Salam accused Trump of stabbing Palestinians in the back. Well, to be fair, it's not only Muslims who are upset with the decision. Palestinian Christians in the Middle East are vehemently opposed to the move. And as you know, the Pope is as well. The decision by Nazareth's mayor could have come with a big cost to his town and its people. The annual celebration is a huge tourist attraction, and it's attended by thousands and thousands of pilgrims. But the town ultimately decided to just cancel the traditional singing and dancing, not the Christmas market and the parade. It's a pity that politics has been allowed to interfere with Christmas in the town where our Savior was raised. My friends, will be right back. Stay right here.
Yeah, so Mom's got this cold. Hashtag stuffy nose, hashtag no sleep. I got it. Hashtag mouth breather.
Yep. It instantly opens your nose up to 38% more than cold medicine alone, so you can breathe and sleep. Go to breatheright.com today to request a free sample.